Thank you, Chair. And may I thank everyone for having a shorter lunch hour today. It's much appreciated. We're going to move on to vision-based technology in just a moment. Before we do, can I just clarify one matter with you from this morning's evidence? We spoke about Bethany Lilly, and we looked at part of the statement provided by her brothers, Alexander and Paul Giel. And can I just get the sequence of events right with you? The statement says this, that Beth was transferred from the Peterborough unit to the Thorpe ward in Basildon. You mentioned A&E, but my understanding of the sequence is that in fact what happened was that she went from the Peterborough unit to A&E, but back to the Peterborough unit, and then from there to the Thorpe ward in Basildon. Just want to correct that on the record. Thank you. So can we move now on to the second part of my questions for you from section 19 of your report, please. So dealing with vision-based patient monitoring systems, which we'll focus on, but touching on vision-based technology such as CCTV and body-worn cameras. Can we deal first with some definitions?
Yes.
First of all, vision-based technology are closed-circuit television systems and body-worn cameras. Are they aspects of vision-based technology?
Yes.
The surveillance camera code of practice defines CCTV as a surveillance camera system used to record or view visual images within a defined environment, with images transmitted to designated monitors or recording systems rather than broadcast publicly. Would that accord with your understanding of CCTV as well?
Yes, that's my understanding.
You add this in the report. This is paragraph 19.2. CCTV is usually fixed and environmental, providing live or recorded footage of communal ward areas for safety, security, and incident review. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we wouldn't see CCTV within a patient's bedroom, for example?
No.
The Information Commissioner's Office refers to body-worn video as involving the use of cameras that are worn by a person and are often attached onto the front of clothing or a uniform. These devices are capable of recording both visual and audio information. Again, does that accord with your understanding of what body-worn cameras do?
It does.
You say in the report that BWC, body-worn cameras, are mobile and staff operated, usually activated in response to incidents or escalating situations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What are the key benefits in the context of mental health inpatients or the inpatient environment of vision-based technology such as CCTV and BWC? This is, for those following, is still paragraph 19.2 at page 65.
The benefit of body-worn cameras and CCTV it helps with investigations. If an incident occurs, it can help us do a more timely and thorough investigation. And it also helps with learning. So particularly the body-worn cameras, we can review footage where there's been an incident of violence and aggression and identify any learning from it.
Are there, on the other hand, some concerns arising from the use of this technology?
Yeah, particularly with body-worn cameras in a busy environment, sometimes they're not switched off. If they are switched on, sometimes the professional wearing them might forget to switch them off, so inadvertently it can record the full shift. You would be at the light is on, but it still doesn't take away that you might have not switched it off. And equally, staff do forget to switch them on.
You also say this in the report, that their use can also feel intrusive or coercive, particularly for patients who are distressed, detained, traumatised or mistrustful of services. Is that right?
Yeah, some patients might feel intimidated if you're going to say, I'm going to switch on the body-worn camera. The they have reported that they feel that's intimidating, but equally some patients have asked for the body-worn camera to be switched on, and all that happens with their request as well. Even though the clinical situation might not indicate you would need to switch it on, if a patient asks for it to be switched on, we switch it on.
You provide further information about vision-based technology in section 20 of the report. I'm not going to ask you further questions about that now. Moving then to VBPMS, Vision-Based Patient Monitoring System, you refer in the report to the CQC definition of these, and this is 19.4, as digital contactless patient monitoring technology using infrared cameras to monitor vital signs, and in some systems, short video clips to assist staff in reviewing movement and presentation. In general terms, how are VBPMS different from vision-based technologies such as CCTV and BWC?
They're in patients' private areas and they're more specific to patient care, so it's not a general oversight, it's more regarding the patient-only areas, private areas.
And you say in the report that they're designed primarily as clinical monitoring tools to support patient safety and well-being.
They are designed to assist us with the safety and welfare of patients, where CCTV and body-worn, yes, they assist in the investigation, but they don't offer a prevention.
You stressed assist, and this may be a point that we come on to, but would you just explain why you stressed assist when you answered my last question?
Yeah, it should assist the practice that's already there, not replace the practice.
You explained that national guidance governing the use of digital technologies started to appear from 2022. This is 19.5 of your report, and you provide details of relevant guidance in section 19 of the report. For present purposes, did that guidance include the 2022 National Mental Health and Learning Disability Nurse Directors Forum guidance on standard operating procedures in the use of VBT in mental health wards?
Sorry, are you asking me if the 2025 guidance reference the...
No. So you refer in section 19 of your report to various guidance of relevance. I'm just asking you if one of those was this Nurse Directors Forum guidance from 2022.
Yes.
And you addressed this at 19.6.
Yes, that was the guidance for mental health and learning disabilities, and the 2025 guidance was for NHS services overall.
We'll come on to that in just a moment. In terms of the Nurse Directors Forum guidance, we've looked at that with individual witness previously, and we actually touched on it yesterday as well. But do key points include from the guidance that VBPMS should be used in addition to and not in place of therapeutic positive engagement?
Yes, that's my understanding.
So picking up on the point that you've just made,
yes.
Does the forum guidance also include recommendations on consent models that should be considered?
It does.
And also what trusts should consider during the rollout of VBPMS, such as Oxyvision?
It does.
Thank you. So this first guidance came out some years after the technology first appeared, if I have understood things correctly.
It did.
You've mentioned the 2025 NHS England principles. Can we come on to those now, please? So are these the principles for using digital technologies in mental health inpatient treatment and care, and are they from February last year?
Yes.
I'd like to look at the 8 principles with you, please. Could you put up the report at page 67 and expand paragraph 19.7. So do you set out here the 8 principles arising from that 2025 guidance? Yes?
Yes.
Just working through some of those, please. Do we see, first of all, human rights approach? Digital technology must support a human rights-based approach to care, and also a reference there to consent and capacity, use of digital technology and collection, storage of patient data must be based on patient consent or a lawful best interests decision. And just dealing with that second bullet point on consent and capacity, can you confirm that that second principle includes that any decision to use digital technologies and to collect and store patient data from the use of such technologies must be based on consent from the patient or a person lawfully acting on their behalf, or be taken following a best interest decision-making process? Can you confirm that's part of that second bullet point?
That is, yes.
And do the principles add that due to the need for personalised decision-making, including seeking patient consent, digital technology must never be used as a blanket approach?
Yes.
Do we see, just dropping down a little bit, other principles covering co-production, procurement, testing, implementation and evaluation should involve co-production with people with lived experience? And then do we see therapeutic and personalised care? Digital technologies must support therapeutic personalised care and must not undermine staff-patient relationships.
Does that mean person-centred care?
No, personalised care, so that care is personalised to that patient's needs.
So it's
person-centred, it's another term.
It's individualised.
Yes, individualised.
So this morning we discussed the need for therapeutic care in observations and engagement. Does that therefore also apply when using technology of this type?
Yes.
Can we see also in the principles on the screen, evidence-based, providers must assess and document the evidence base before procuring and implementing digital technology. Chair, we'll be hearing from a separate expert witness tomorrow addressing matters relevant to the question of an evidence base. So I won't take that further now. But may I just ask you this, please, Ms. Archbold, about the principles cumulatively? How significant are they in the context of vision-based patient monitoring system, VBPMS, in the mental health inpatient context?
What, the evidence base?
No,
Sorry.
all 8 principles. How significant are they?
They're essential. They're essential that we must consider all of those elements in delivering care.
Thank you. Would you take that down, please? Can I ask you a question about the regulatory oversight of VBPMS, please? Do you have a view whether any particular regulatory body is well placed to consider and decide on the benchmark for the quality of vision-based monitoring systems?
I don't think I do. I'm not sure if I do know a specific regulatory body that could comment on the technology. I think each regulatory body might comment on its impact in that field, but I couldn't say an overall
Thank you.
arch.
I'd like to ask you about the last sentence of paragraph 19.8 of the report. It's page 67, and in fact, it's at the top of page 68. You say there that the central ethical tension is between privacy, autonomy, versus patient and staff safety when you're talking about this form of technology. Would you just expand on that point, please?
Yes, you've got to balance a patient's privacy and autonomy, whether they consent to such intervention based with the patient's safety. With it being a relatively new technology, my interpretation of this is that it's assisting us with what we're already doing, so it shouldn't be... with vision-based technology, it can be there to guide us and assist us, but it shouldn't replace what's already there. So if somebody is not consenting or there's serious privacy and dignity concerns, I think you would revert back to the human factors such as observations and engagement.
Thank you.
You would rely on that for safety. I don't think it's essential, a piece of equipment to keep somebody safe.
Just dealing then, moving on to section 21 of your report, where you describe Oxyvision, a form of VB-PMS. We've heard a fair amount of evidence about this technology from witnesses from OxyHealth, now Leo, ePut, and yesterday indeed from 2 witnesses from other trusts. I'd like to look at part of your report with you. Would you put up the report, please, at page 72 and expand paragraphs 21.1 and 21.2? Do we see here, Miss Archibald, that you say in 2012 Oxyvision was developed by OxyHealth, but its use in NHS mental health inpatient practice appears to have expanded mainly from around 2019 to 2021, and by December 2021, Oxyvision was reported to be in use in 50% of mental health trusts. Indeed, that accords, I think, with other evidence that we've heard. Do you then list at paragraph 21.2 what Oxyvision can do?
Yes.
And can we see perform remote visual checks of a patient in their bedroom, measure pulse and breathing rate without physical contact, where the patient is still and sufficiently visible to the camera with suitable focal points such as hand or foot available for the system to calculate the reading, help staff check whether a patient is in bed, in the room, out of the room or in the bathroom, and provide alerts or notifications for configured situations, and also to produce activity information. Do you list all of those as what Oxyvision can offer?
I did, yes.
Thank you. Could you take that down, please? I'd like to look with you at an Oxyvision patient poster used at ePut. This is from the Standard Operating Procedure version 12 from the 30th of April 2025. Could you put up, please, ePut 009884 at page 19? And could you expand down to and including both those points? Thank you very much. Can we see here, Oxyvision technology is installed in all bedrooms. Oxyvision is a medical device that uses an infrared sensitive camera to measure your pulse and breathing rate without disturbing you. And can we actually see the unit there with the camera on the left and the infrared lights on the right?
Yes.
And do we see in the last bullet point on the top half of the screen, alert staff when you have entered the bathroom and are out of range of the sensor? So does that pick up on actually one of the points that we've mentioned from your report?
Yes.
And then at the bottom, use of video, what staff can see in your room. A clear image can be seen for up to 15 seconds only when checking your pulse and breathing rate. And a blurred image can be seen for up to 15 seconds only when a notification has been received. And these are points that we've covered with other witnesses too. But may I ask you about that last bullet point, please, the blurred image. You say in your report, and this is 21.4, that when a red or amber Oxyvision alert is triggered, staff may be able to access a pixelated image of the room to help them understand the possible cause of the alert. The purpose of the pixelated view is to provide limited visual information while reducing the level of intrusion compared with a clear image. So is the pixelation intended to provide some level of privacy whilst allowing a staff member to gain an idea of what is taking place in the room, in your understanding?
That's my understanding, yes.
Can I ask you this? To what extent do you think that pixelating the image of the person actually reduce privacy and dignity concerns? You refer to this at 21.4.
When you're looking at the pixelated image, you don't know what you're about to see. So you don't know if a patient is engaging in private time or getting changed. And even though you might not be able to solely identify the patient from the image, you still get an insight into what they're doing in their private space. But equally, you aren't assured that that's the patient who's meant to be in that room.
Ah.
So if you've got a ward which is all male patients, there's an opportunity that other patients go into each other's rooms. It doesn't give you, might give you a snapshot of what the alert is, or it could be, it doesn't give you enough assurances, so you would need to go around anyway.
Just picking up on aspects
And
of
it could have two people in the room.
It could
too.
have two people in the room.
So compromising two people's.
Yeah. And the two people could be another member of staff in the room helping with personal care. Again, so when you look at the pixelated image, you don't know what you're about to see, so you can't. Where if you knock on a bedroom door, the patient might say, "Can you give me a minute?" So you're given a warning, but with a pixelated image, there is no warning of the image.
You add this in the report. A pixelated image is still visual access into a patient's private bedroom and should not be treated as non-intrusive.
Yes.
And you say the fact that the image is pixelated reduces but does not remove the privacy and dignity concerns. And is that picking up on what you've just been explaining?
Yes, and also the patient has no idea that you've just looked into their bedroom.
Unlike the knock at the door.
The knock at the door will give them a warning, yeah.
What are the relevant considerations about whether to view a pixelated or blurred, a pixelated image or not? What should be in the forefront of a staff member's mind when deciding whether to access that pixelated view?
When an alert goes off, the ideal practice is that you would go and check on the area physically. You would walk around, check on the patient, and then you would reset the alarm because you're assured about the patient's safety. In other situations where an example could be there's maintenance been taking place in the room, so there might be a painter and decorator in the room constantly triggering off the alarm. So you might be aware that there's some work going on in the room, so when the alarm goes off you might check to see it's still the painter and decorator in the room. But it's only in those circumstances when you know there's a certain activity going on in the room, or you know that there's a member of staff in the room helping somebody, that you might just double check the pixelated image and not go around. But really the practice would be, and there's alert going off, go and see what's happening. That's what.
You add in the report, this is paragraph 21.6 for those who are following, that the key question remains whether viewing the image is necessary, proportionate, individually justified, and the least intrusive means of responding to the identified risk. Is that correct?
Yes.
And should the use of pixelated image be governed by clear policy, staff training, audit and documentation, including when a face-to-face check is required following an alert?
Yes.
So dealing with the other bullet point we can see at the bottom of our screens about accessing a clear image for up to 15 seconds, please. The explanation there is that the clear image is available when checking pulse and breathing rates. Is that the vital signs function of the technology?
Yes.
Why would it be important to have a clear view of a patient before taking vital signs using Oxyvision?
I'm only assuming that the technology can only take the vital signs if it has a clear view. I'm not sure if it's necessary for the nurse to have a clear view to get the vital signs.
So this might be a requirement of the technology rather than of staff?
Yes.
Just asking you about a very general point, please. What concerns may arise from the presence of a camera in an inpatient's bedroom? And we've seen photographs or stills previously of the unit in the bedroom. It's quite a big unit.
It is.
So could you just, in general terms, explain what kind of concerns may just the existence of the camera have in an inpatient's bedroom? What kind of concerns might that give rise to?
Some patients can be particularly sensitive to being observed or feeling that they're being watched. The device itself doesn't obviously look like a camera. It's a device that I've never seen anything that looks like it before. So I think there'd be concerns of what is it, what does it do, but equally it can instill. Some of our patients already have paranoid and struggle to trust professionals and struggle to trust anybody, so that can reinforce that we're not to be trusted and equally increase their paranoia. I've witnessed some patients scream at the device thinking, and it can be confusing for some.
We heard actually yesterday, we saw in a report an instance where a woman actually refused to go into the bedroom where there was an Oxyvision unit and had to be, a different place had to be found for her to stay in. Have you had that kind of response to the Oxyvision unit in your experience?
Yes, I've had patients that have smashed the device or covered it up and sleep on the sofas in the main areas because they feel uncomfortable with the device in the room.
Would you take that down, please? I want to come back to consider with you this clear image view and what is termed clear video data, please. Would you put up EPUT 009884 at page 12? This is the standard operating procedure from EPUT version 12, published on the 30th of April 2025. So EPUT 009884. Thank you very much. So do we see here the EPUT SOP, or standard operating procedure, governing clear video data? I just want to look at aspects of this with you, please. Clear video data, or CVD, is non-pixelated video footage that can be clipped and saved upon request if there is a situation that needs to be further investigated. So you were referring before in relation to CCTV and body-worn cameras that one of the advantages could be that the recorded footage there might be able to assist with an incident or something of that nature. Does this suggest that something similar can happen with footage captured by Oxyvision within a patient's bedroom?
It does.
Just dropping down a little bit, the request must be made directly to OxyHealth within 24 hours of the situation or incident. And we've heard that the data is automatically deleted after a 24-hour period. Is that your understanding too?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And upon receipt of a request, OxyHealth will clip and save CVD. Once authorization has been granted, OxyHealth attend site to transfer the clipped CVD to a secure USP for delivery. And do we see at the bottom, clear video data is automatically deleted after 24 hours, the point that we've just been discussing? So if there's been an incident and you want to access the footage, you have to do it pretty quickly, within 24 hours.
Yes.
Now, we've heard from a number of witnesses now that, in fact, when the system is present in a patient's bedroom and activated, it's actually recording 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, it is.
And that is clear view footage, so not pixelated, clear footage, a clear view of the patient in their bedroom.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
What are your views about that facility, the fact that it's on and recording all the time?
I struggle to understand why it needs to be on, and I do. It is concerning, and also it's not made explicit to patients that that is the case.
Does that go to the question of informed consent? We were
Yes.
talking about that before. In your view, is that something that should be explained to a patient when they're deciding whether they want to consent to the use of the system?
Yes.
You say this more generally in the report. This is 29.4. In my view, the ability to obtain a clear view, use pixelated images, and retain clear view data for up to 24 hours creates a significant intrusion into a private space. So that's paragraph 29.4 at page 97. Would you just expand on that, please?
I think it goes beyond being absolutely necessary. So if we consider that if patients are detained under the Mental Health Act or the Capacity Act, you still have to justify that it's absolutely necessary to do things against their wishes. I don't think 24-hour filming of them in their private space is absolutely necessary or justified. I can understand how it might give some reassurance to families or even patients. Some patients do consent to, some patients do seek reassurance. Applying the principles, if I was a patient or a family member, it's not something that I would be comfortable having. And I think before you do anything or suggest anything to your patients, you need to ask, is it good enough for me and is it good enough for my family?
Thank you very much. Your report recognises that VB-PMS may not be experienced as neutral by patients, and in fact you've just given us some fairly compelling examples of that, but rather as an intrusion or a loss of privacy, regardless of the intent. Do you agree this is likely to be the case regardless of whether patients have experienced trauma or psychosis?
It can be very traumatic. Most people have not been filmed in their private area in any aspects of their life, but for patients who have suffered significant trauma, that might have been the case. So it can be very traumatic, very intrusive.
But the point here is actually patients who haven't, for example, a patient who's not paranoid or doesn't have a specific trauma, do you agree that that feeling of loss of privacy can be equally keenly felt by them?
Yes.
Can we take that down, please? Can we stay with the vital signs function just for the moment? As we've seen, it covers pulse and breathing rates. Now, we looked this morning at the News 2 measurements, the 6 different measurements that need to be taken. Is it right that vital signs actually covers only 2 of them?
That's right, yes.
So, for example, blood pressure would be something that wouldn't be covered by vital signs, but would be required by News.
Yes.
You say in the report that a vital signs reading, does not replace a full set of physical observations, and that the vital sign function cannot and does not replace physical health monitoring. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So Oxyvision could not be misunderstood, or should not be misunderstood, to be a substitute for News monitoring.
No, my understanding is that vital signs is not although it offers a 15-minute window, it would not be used to replace news or inform clinical assessment.
Is there a purpose for a technology that covers only part of the News 2 required measurements and does not replace physical health monitoring?
It might just offer some assurances that the patient is alive. The risk of that is the professional or the person using it might interpret it as a full set of observations when in fact it's not.
Now, we've heard evidence, including yesterday, that the vital signs function actually only works within particular parameters.
Yes.
Is that your understanding
Yes.
too? So to what extent could it safely be used to demonstrate whether someone, a patient in their bedroom, was alive or not?
If it was able to have two body parts available and that it could get a reading from those body parts.
So where it is able to pick to make a reading within the defined or the recognised parameters, that could provide a sign of life, basically.
It could show a sign of life, yeah. The only time, if a patient is stood up in their bedroom, that in itself is a sign of life, so there'd be no requirement to access vital signs, in my opinion.
But
Is there a danger, though, that because it can't recognise vital signs beyond certain parameters, that people will occasionally think, well, it's not actually showing me that someone's alive, but that may just be because it's outside the parameters of what this can show?
Yes, if somebody's lying in the bed during the night and it can't pick up vital signs, there is a risk that there's an assumption it's just because they've got no two body parts available.
So you've mentioned two body parts a couple of times. We actually went through this yesterday. In order for a vital signs measurement to be successfully taken, we've seen do blobs actually need to be on exposed body parts for the reading to be taken?
Yes.
And so a reading may not be taken where that hasn't happened, just to explain what you've just said.
Yes.
You. I'd like to look at another part of your report, please. Would you put up the report at page 74 and expand paragraph 21.9? So seclusion, HBPOS, is that health-based place of safety?
Place of safety, yes.
LTS, long-term, is that long-term segregation or seclusion?
Long-term segregation.
And we see a reference to EPUT's policy. That's in fact a reference to the standard operating procedure version 12 we've just been looking at. Can we just read on, please? EPUT's policy distinguishes between the use of oxyvision in ordinary patient bedrooms and its use in higher risk areas such as seclusion, LTS and HBPOS. In patient bedrooms, the vital signs function provides spot check readings of pulse and respiratory rate when staff actively request them, but it does not alert staff to abnormal pulse, abnormal respiratory rate, cessation of breathing, or clinical deterioration. However, EPUT's policy indicates that in seclusion, LTS and HBPOS settings, the system can alert to breathing and pulse concerns. So, vital signs outside the seclusion context does not alert staff to those matters such as clinical deterioration. To what extent, in your view, does that limit the assistance that vital signs can provide?
It would, to request vital signs, there must be a professional curiosity in the first place to request it. It wouldn't, the system, to my knowledge, doesn't alert us when there's a physical deterioration that might lead us to request the vital signs. It would just be from our own instinct to request it. But if I recall, remember from the way the policy was written, is that there might be some assumptions, misunderstanding from patients and families that the system alerts us to deterioration.
When it doesn't.
To my knowledge, it doesn't.
You say that, sorry, this paragraph in the report says that in the seclusion, LTS and HBPOS context, vital signs, breath and respiratory measurements can be used to alert breathing and pulse concerns. Why can they be used in that environment?
I don't know.
Is it, or might it be because those are potentially higher risk environments and may contain, there may be a patient who would react badly to, for example, a News 2 type of measurement?
Possibly. Seclusion and long-term segregation patients tend to possibly be on higher doses of medication, more acutely disturbed, where the hospital place of safety patients are unknown.
You say, just finishing this paragraph, this distinction is important because patients, families and staff may assume that Oxyvision provides the same level of physiological monitoring in all areas. In ordinary bedrooms, it should not be understood as a deterioration alert system or a substitute for physical health monitoring, News 2, face-to-face assessment or professional judgment. Is that all correct?
Yes.
You add later in the report, for those following, it's 24.10 at page 85, that vital signs may be unable to obtain a reading if the patient is moving, has tremors, is covered, is not clearly visible, or where visible body parts are affected by factors such as scarring or tattoos. In effect, the vital signs function may provide an indication of pulse and breathing, but it should not be understood as continuous physical health monitoring or as a system that will detect all forms of clinical deterioration. Now, does that sort of summarise all of the points we've just been discussing?
Yes.
Would you take that down, please? What are the scenarios in which the vital signs function is most likely to be of use, in your view?
During the night time, in seclusions, it's important to note that people who are in seclusion or long-term segregation are in the hospital place of safety, and during the those three areas, they have an assigned member of staff with them at all times who will be reviewing the screen. The screen will be in front of them at all times. In comparison to the general wards, the more than likely won't have a member of staff assigned or watching a screen at all times. But in regards to vital signs being used, possibly through the night could be beneficial if the patient agrees, so you're not entering the room and we're not disrupting sleep.
Are there particular patient groups where VB-PMS is more likely to cause harm, increase distress, or undermine therapeutic relationships? You've given an example of someone who might be paranoid, but are there other categories where it's more likely that the system will cause harm? It
could be any patient group, even with patients with an organic illness such as dementia. It could cause confusion, distress for patients who've got a history of trauma. There's lots of factors that might negatively impact them, and also patients who distrust what we're doing with that information and how we're accessing it and what we see.
Thank you. You explain in the report that, and this is paragraph 21.10 at page 75, EPUT and some other trusts have implemented an additional digital observations module within the Oxyvision platform, sometimes referred to as OxyObs or Oxyvision Observations. This appears to support the carrying out and recording of ward observations through digital devices. So we covered this morning paper-based records and electronic records. Is your understanding that Oxyvision Observations is an electronic record system?
Yes.
Can we just look at EPUT's standard operating procedure? This is the same one we looked at before. Would you put up EPUT 009884 at page 14 and expand the top half of the page? Thank you. So this is the description there of Oxyvision Observations. Oxyvision Observations is a digital observation module within the Oxyvision system. The Oxyvision Observations module is a digital version of the paper observations record. Oxyvision Observations is implemented only on Oxyvision-equipped inpatient wards, seclusion rooms and health-based places of safety to enhance and improve patient care and safety in order to, and then do we see 3 bullet points with the reasons for it, provide a clear record of observations in a digital format for integration to the electronic patient record, assist in the identification of trends, report on quality of therapeutic engagement and supportive observation activity. And then do we see at the bottom, the nurse in charge will check the completion of observations periodically during their shift and provide the assurance in the clinical guideline. So do we see all of that there from the SOP?
Yes.
So we see that it's meant to be a digital version of the paper observations record. And as I've said, we've discussed this morning records, both paper-based and digital. You've suggested this is paragraph 21.10. So this appears to support the carrying out and record of ward observations through digital devices. However, the terminology risks further conflating observation. Therefore, any use of an Oxyvision Observations module should be clearly distinguished from the clinical and therapeutic purpose of close observations. Would you just explain what you meant by that, please?
I think the term observation is, because it's called Oxyvision Observations, there could be a risk that you use Oxyvision to do your observations.
Oh, I see. Rather than just as a replacement for paper records.
Yeah. So the fact it's called Oxyvision Observations, it could, for somebody who's not well experienced or not familiar with it could imply that you use Oxyvision.
Would you take that down, please? Before we move on to another topic, I'd like to look at one of the illustrative examples you've given in the report. And you've touched on the nighttime use of Oxyvision. So this is going back to that point, please. At 24.5, you refer to Adam Steele. His father, Paul Steele, has given a witness statement to the inquiry and came to give evidence to us in October last year, and in fact also previously has given commemorative evidence. Adam was a patient on the Peterborough ward at the Colchester Hospital. He was admitted to the ward on the afternoon of the 13th of October 2021, and he died the following morning at the age of 36.
I'm just going to interrupt you because
Yes.
it's 24.15.
24.15, thank you for that correction.
Sorry. Forgive me.
Not at all, thank you. Do you have that in front of you if you need to?
Yes, I found.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to put part of the transcript of Paul's evidence to us on the screens, please. Would you put up the transcript of Paul Steele, day 34. That's the 23rd of October 2025. The reference is INQY 016285 at page 15. Could you expand up to and including line 21? Perfect. I just want to look at part of this with you, please. Do you see a question there? And were his observations undertaken via oxyvision only? Is that what your understanding is? And the answer, that's my understanding, yes. Then dropping down to the next answer, there was an observation window in his room, and his bed was in such a position that it couldn't be seen through the observation window due to its location. And I was concerned that there was even more reason why he should have been physically visited face to face if they couldn't see his bed through the observation window. And then looking at the last question and answer, and as far as you can ascertain, there was camera observations and no physical observations. Answer, that's correct. So is it your understanding here that oxyvision data showed that Adam's bedroom door had not opened at any point during the night?
Yes.
As we can see from here, his bed wasn't visible from the door window. Was he on level 2 observations, meaning, in this case, 4 checks an hour?
I've documented that he was on level 2 observations.
Yes. And so Adam wasn't observed face to face. Just in your view, what does this illustrate, Adam's case? The conduct of observations remotely and not actually going into the bedroom overnight.
I've wrote in my report, and it might just be from how I've read the information provided, that I couldn't determine whether he was observed via the vision-based as well. I didn't see data to see how many times I checked on it. We did the check every 15 minutes, as is prescribed observation levels. But this highlights the risk of relying on a technology instead of human observation.
You say this, the importance of face-to-face checks in determining a patient's safety and well-being is an important factor arising.
Yes.
And remote viewing or reliance on oxyvision is insufficient to determine whether a patient is physically well, emotionally distressed, deteriorating, or in need of urgent observation. Yes?
Yeah, the human assessment would pick up on a deteriorating patient.
Thank you. Would you take that down, please? So the suggestion has been that remote observations are less restrictive, particularly at night. Do you agree that reducing disturbance is not always necessarily less restrictive if it involves increasing remote surveillance?
You've got to balance up what's more and take into consideration what the patient's views are, whether can we disrupt sleep in a more meaningful way. There's lots of things in the environment that we can do rather than solely relying on technology, but the technology can assist, but it still doesn't replace the human factors.
Is it right to say that for some patients, nighttime is when they are most likely to need support and engagement? Because if they're awake, patients are likely to have experienced or may have experienced night terrors, insomnia or anxiety.
Yeah, night times can be incredibly difficult for a lot of patients for lots of various reasons. There's a lot of quiet time, there's a lot of time for reflection. People tend to miss the families more, and equally it can be a trauma response. So night times tend to be quite risky as well.
Would you agree that there might actually need to be some form of human contact during the night in those kinds of circumstances?
Yes, and some patients are also frightened from other patients, so having staff available can offer them some reassurance.
just want to pick up on something you've said in the report. This is paragraph 25.13 at page 91. You note that Oxyvision may provide information about room activity, vital signs, attempts, alerts, or whether someone is present in a room. But you go on to say this: it cannot reliably identify who the patient is, understand the meaning of behaviour, assess emotional distress, recognise elation, agitation, or hopelessness, or determine whether a patient is experiencing urges to self-harm. Does that all underscore the need for the human element in addition to any virtual viewing of a patient or relying on technology such as vital signs?
Yes, it's that they just highlight how the human interaction would pick up on those elements.
Thank you. Chair, I've just finished a topic. This might be a good time for our afternoon break. So it's now 2:45. May I suggest we come back at 3 p.m, please?
3 p.m. through it.
Ms Archibald, you've considered in your report 2 of EPUT's standard operating procedures on Oxyvision. This is in section 22 of your report, and I'd like to move to that now, please. And we'll bear in mind the NHS England principles that we've already discussed, including on the topic of consent. Was the first SOP you considered version 10 from the 31st of May 2024?
Yes.
Does that therefore precede the NHS England principles?
It did, yes.
Was the second one that you considered version 12 published on the 7th of May 2025 and therefore after the publication of the principles?
Yes.
I'd like to just discuss version 10 and the approach there with you now, and to focus on the issue of consent and how that actually then goes on to change between version 10 and version 12. So that's just setting the scene. Is that all right?
Yes.
And we've heard evidence from EPUT about this, and in fact, we heard evidence yesterday from a witness from another trust that has substantially the same approach currently to version 10 of the EPUT SOP. And what we learned there and what we can see in the version 10 SOP is a process that I want to look at with you now. Could you please put up EPUT SOP version 10 at EPUT 004791 at page 14? Thank you. So this is the Oxyvision consent flow chart from the earlier of the 2 SOPs that you've looked at. And what I want to do for present purposes is to trace with you through the scenario where you have a patient with capacity who does not want the Oxyvision system to be switched on and used in their bedroom. All right?
Yes.
Can we see, therefore, at the top of the page, fully inform patient family carers about the Oxyvision system purpose and functionality as part of admission procedure? So the SOP requires that the patient and others are provided with information. Does that go to this point we've been discussing a couple of times now of needing to obtain informed consent?
Yes.
We'll come on in a moment to look at some other information to see to what extent EPUT have actually been successful in their consent processes. But that's a separate point that we'll come on to. Can we see at the top of the page, in this SOP, Oxyvision is switched on from admission? And is that what has been termed a blanket approach for the first up to 72 hours while an assessment takes place?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
And so that will be turned on regardless of what background the patient has and regardless of, initially at least, whether they consent or not.
Yes.
Moving down, does the patient family carer object? Can you see that?
Yeah.
If we move to the right, yes. And following that through, can I just say how helpful it is to have this highlighting? Thank you very much. Just following down, can we see this? 2B, document discussion and objection in patient record and inform responsible clinician within 24 hours. So the system is on at this stage, correct?
Yes.
MDT meeting within 72 hours, objection discussed as part of individual risk assessment. This is number 3. Patient capacity established, clinical recommendation on use of Oxyvision. So during the initial period of 72 hours, or up to 72 hours, the system is on, as we've established, regardless to whether the patient has consented or not.
Yes.
Do we next see on the flow chart to the left, does the patient have capacity?
Yes.
And as I've said, let's assume for present purposes that they do. Do we then go to 4B, meeting with patient and decision documented in patient record? Yes?
Yes.
And under that, the two options of MDT decision to keep on implemented or MDT decision to switch off implemented. So can we just take stock? In summary, does this flowchart mean that a patient arriving on the ward will have the system switched on by default for up to the first 72 hours,
Yes.
and that where the patient objects and has capacity, the ultimate decision as to whether the system remains on is not the patient's, it's that taken in the MDT?
That's my understanding of how it's written and worded, yeah.
You set out at 22.6, page 76, some of your views about this approach to consent. Could I just ask you to deal with those and explain a little bit more what your views are about this approach?
If a patient has capacity and they refuse, I struggle to identify how the MDT can overrule that, even if there were a patient under the under a patient detained under the Mental Health Act. And regardless of whether they have capacity or not, a patient can still have a view on something, and I think I struggle to grasp that it still falls down to the MDT to make a decision when the patient either has capacity and refuses, or lacks capacity but still doesn't wish to use it.
Yeah, you say this at paragraph 22.6. In my view, SOP 10 risked placing organisational approval above the patient's expressed refusal. So that's picking up on the point that you've just made.
Yes.
And you add, this is difficult to reconcile with a genuine, consent-based, patient-centred and rights-based approach, particularly where the patient was informal or where the legal basis for continued monitoring was not clearly identified. Can I just ask you about that point about the informal patient? Why would that make a difference here?
There would be no legal framework for that patient to object, and they would run the risk of the patient might take in their own discharge even though they're in need of help because of an intervention that they do not agree with.
Thank you. Could you take that down, please? May I just ask you a few more questions about this? Is your view that decisions should be taken on a case-by-case basis?
It should, yes.
How likely do you think it is that decisions will, in reality, be taken on a case-by-case basis if Oxyvision has been installed in every bedroom on many wards within a trust?
I think it places clinicians in a difficult position that they've got to justify why they're not using the technology. So it might place you in a position where you're in favour of a technology, and you would hope that all patients would have it. So that might influence sort of your speaking to your patients about it. It's like you're trying to sell them something. I can't think of another word, but it feels like you're trying to sell them something
Because it's there.
Because it's there.
Thank you.
And you've got to, there's a process that you've got to follow. If somebody doesn't want it, it should be a harder process if somebody does want it rather than if they didn't want it.
Thank you. So that was version 10. The second version you looked at, version 12, 2025, and after the NHS England principles came out. And I think we can, in terms of consent, we can deal quite shortly with the change of approach. You deal with this at paragraph 22.7. You say the main change to practice was reducing from 72 to 6 hours for MDT consideration, and you describe that as a positive development. as I understand it, the version 12 still, so there would still be a period, albeit much shorter, 6 hours, where the system would be on by default, up to 6 hours, correct?
Yes.
And did version 12 maintain the other element we were looking at, namely that the final decision would not be that of the patient, but would be taken by the MDT?
It did not change that approach. It's still, final decision was made by the MDT.
And so to what extent do you see version 12 as, in reality, an improvement on the points that you've made in relation to version 10?
My opinion was it showed recognition for the patient's views, but it still didn't go far enough.
And we covered yesterday the situation where a patient lacks capacity, the decision being a best interest decision. We covered that best interest concept briefly this morning, yes?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you more about that now. Now, have EPUT signalled a change of approach in relation to their approach to consent?
I believe that they've changed or plan to change the procedure in that it's you have to consent for it to be switched on at the point of admission.
So you say this at 22.10. A memo was issued with immediate effect stating that Oxyvision should only be switched on where the patient consents. Where the patient lacks capacity to consent, the decision to switch Oxyvision on must be considered by the MDT with consultation with the patient's family and carers where appropriate. The decision to switch Oxyvision on must be clinically justified. Now, do you understand that potentially to be a move to an opt-in model of consent for the use of Oxyvision at EPUT?
That's my understanding. The updated operational policy wasn't at hand when I wrote this. This was the memo to say that this was the planned way of working. And
this is a change that was signalled at least in May this year, correct?
Yes.
But that would signal a potentially major change of approach.
It would, yeah.
I'd like to look now at the effectiveness of the consent processes at EPUT, please. And I'm going to ask that a document is put up for this, please. Would you put up EPUT TIAA Assurance Review of Consent for Oxyvision? That's EPUT 020913 on the second page, please. Thank you. Would you expand, that's perfect, yes, expand the left part of the page as you had it there, please. So this is the executive summary. Can we see at the bottom, the overall objective was to provide assurance on the effectiveness of the consent processes in place within the trust. This review focused on the arrangements for consent for Oxyvision. So this is October 2025, and just to remind us all, it's looking at consent processes at EPUT, yes?
Yes.
And it's difficult to read, but the circle there, can we see going round the top, adequate and effective governance, risk and control processes, with the conclusion there, limited assurance?
Yes.
Would you expand the top right-hand box, key strategic findings? So do we see here, the Trust has in place an Oxyvision standard operating procedure which clearly outlines the processes in place for obtaining consent for the use of Oxyvision, training requirements and roles and responsibilities clearly identified as part of the process. So that's the first point, isn't it?
Yes.
Do we then see audit testing identified that for 4 of 10 staff, the competency checklist was not evidenced, as no response was received from the relevant ward manager within the time frame of the audit. And next, testing of a sample of 17 patients across 5 wards in June and July, where Oxyvision is in use, identified significant exceptions, such as lack of evidence of completed admissions checklist within 6 hours of patient's admission for 21 patients. And then it was confirmed that at the time of audit fieldwork, there was no oversight arrangements for senior management committee to regularly review data in relation to consent for Oxyvision. The implementation plan for Oxyvision did include steps to agree audit and assurance plan and to align tenderable audit to new SOP. So you addressed this at paragraph 22.9. What does this and the further information in it indicate to you in terms of consent processes at EPUT?
It highlighted that although the policy might have changed, practice hadn't, or it wasn't compliant with the policy about gaining consent from patients.
So does this potentially go in part to that question of informed consent that we were talking about before?
Yes.
You say that this is 22.9. It also supports the concern that patients may have had regarding Oxyvision being active in their bedrooms without timely evidence that they'd been properly informed, had capacity to consent, and had given meaningful consent. Yes, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you take that down, please? You say in the report, this is paragraph 22.16 at page 78. I've not seen evidence that VBPMS directly influenced individual patient care in a systematic or clearly documented way. You're referring to the data, you say it does not in itself demonstrate that VBPMS improved patient outcomes or informed clinical decision-making for individual patients. Now, would you explain what you meant by that?
I didn't see from the evidence that I was provided with, I didn't see where the Oxyvision data influence patient care directly. So if you refer back to the 2025 guidance, it says it must impact treatment outcomes, and I couldn't see the link from the technology actually informing patient care, whether changes to care and treatment were made based on the data from Oxyvision.
Thank you. I want to move on to another topic, please, and this is at section 24 of your report, Oxyvision data reports. Now, you were provided with a number of OxyHealth monthly usage reports for EPUT wards, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, we've looked at these monthly usage reports with previous witnesses, including the equivalent yesterday for another trust. So we're familiar with the layout and how they work in general terms. But were you provided with usage reports for June 2024, June 2025, and April 2026?
I was, yes.
I want to, what you then helpfully do in section 24 of the report is, first of all, using that data, consider some high usage wards, and then later look at some low usage wards. So can we work through that together, please? Starting with the high usage wards, and I'm talking about usage of the vital signs function. Would you put up the report, please, at page 83 and expand the table at the top? So we can see a table here, refer to it if you need to, but can we see that here a number of different wards, but do we actually see 3 older adult You've got one adult acute, two adult acutes and two older adult wards there, yes?
Yes.
You suggest in the report that the 24 and 25 data raises significant privacy and dignity concerns. That's 24.4. Would you mind explaining what you meant by that?
The readings, the attempts, that's a lot of attempts in a day per ward, per bed, but the actual reading was less than 50%, so it would appear that a 15-second clear view of that bedroom occurred, but an actual reading was taken in less than 50%, so it would bring into question what was the purpose of the view if it wasn't for a reading. And also the high usage, I couldn't understand why you would need to do an attempt of vital signs that frequently per day.
You say this: if each attempt involved a clear visual view into the patient's bedroom, then the level of visual access may be considerably greater than patients understand when the function is described as vital signs monitoring. Yes, is that right?
Yes.
And you add, the question is whether repeated unsuccessful attempts are compatible with privacy, dignity, meaningful consent, and least restrictive practice. Yes?
Yes.
You at 24.6, you raise concerns particularly about the Cherry Down ward. We can see at the top of the list. Would you just explain what your concerns were there?
Their usage of vital signs doubled in a year.
Could you find any obvious clinical rationale for the high amount of times that they were checking for vital signs? 2.7, you cover this. Sorry, 24.7.
I've put in the report that they were checking, on average, it was every 29 minutes per bedroom.
Across a 24-hour period?
Across a 24-hour period per bedroom. I cannot identify what clinical rationale there would be to do this level of vital sign check.
And you list, or you cover at 24.8 possible explanations for this. But is one of them, for example, that the vital signs function might be being used as a substitute for observations and engagement?
Yes, that's a possibility.
And is there also, as you say there, a theoretical risk of inappropriate use?
Yes.
Can we just talk about the 2026 data? You cover this from 24.9. And you make the point that the high use of the Oxyvision vital signs function continued on 3 of the wards, although attempts to reduce slightly. But is there any significant change in those wards between the June 24 and the April 26 data that you considered?
There's not a significant change apart from Gloucester ward. There's no change. It's reduced from 2024, but it hasn't significantly reduced.
Thank you.
In a year.
Can we move then to low, could you take that down, please? To low usage wards. And do you, this is from 24.20, do you identify 3 wards with significantly lower usage of the vital signs function over the same time periods?
I did, yes.
And in these cases, does the April 2026 data, so the last period of data that you have, show a significant reduction in a vital signs attempts, equating to fewer than 2 attempts per bed per day across all 3 wards?
Yeah, that is a significant. You could argue that that's more an expected usage.
So those wards were, one was a forensic secure ward, one was a young person's ward, and one was a low secure ward, correct?
Yes.
So you've given us one side of the data, the high usage wards, and we've talked very briefly about what might be going on there. we're now looking at these low usage wards. Are you able to provide an explanation or possible explanation for why the usage is so much lower here?
Potentially it could be the patient population. The low secure forensic wards, by nature of it, are high-risk patients. It could be that they're on high observation level, so it's not required to do remote check-in at all because there's somebody there. And particularly with the young persons, it might be have more staff availability and higher observation levels and older adult on an adult acute ward. They're just potential reasons why.
Understood. You say this at 24.22. The contrast, and I think this is the contrast between the high and the low usage wards, therefore raises an important governance question. Why are some adult and older adult wards using the vital signs function at substantially higher rates than secure or young person services? And you add at 24.23, the variation between wards suggests that high usage is unlikely to be an unavoidable feature of this technology itself. It may instead reflect differences in ward culture, training, clinical expectations, staffing practice, or governance. Is there anything more you'd like to say about that point?
Yeah, on some wards, it could just be the culture that it's expected, that it's not uncommon to frequently access a patient's bedroom, where on other wards the governance might be more clear and training might be, staff be more trained and familiar on its purpose. So there could just be a difference of
Culture. Thank you. Just moving now towards the end of the report, where you reflect on potential benefits and harms, and you provide your reflections in conclusion. Now, during the course of the evidence we've heard and received so far from OxyHealth, or Leo, and EPUT, we've been informed of a number of important claimed benefits that Oxyvision affords, and they include, but they're not limited to, a suggestion of enhanced physical health monitoring, also of time savings, allowing for staff time to be freed up for patient engagement, and linked with that, improvements in patient and staff experience in the context of allowing for a more therapeutic approach, financial incentives, that the technology can be less intrusive than a staff member coming into the room and disturbing a patient, particularly at night, that the system delivers reductions in rates of patient safety events, and the provision of video and other data following an incident, and the provision of reports of the type that we've just been discussing. Now, we've covered those points, but the suggestion in terms is that they add up to an important tool to assist in looking after mental health in patients, keeping them safe, and maximising the potential for properly therapeutic engagement. Now, having considered all of this and having gone through your evidence today, what do you say about that?
I welcome assisted technology. My experience of Oxyvision in practice is that for it to be effective, you almost have to put Oxyvision on observations, so somebody is assigned to have that portable device that would alert. So that member of staff has to respond to those alerts. So my experience, it's not saved time. It's added an extra layer of work on, but what it has to do is give us an insight into what's going on in patients' bedrooms when we're not there. That's what it has given, but you've got to balance of, is that absolutely necessary?
You say this at paragraph 31.2, it's page 99. However, I remain concerned that the introduction of such technology into inpatient mental health settings carries significant clinical, ethical, and human rights implications. A camera sensor or alert cannot understand distress, hopelessness, shame, agitation, elation, paranoia, trauma, responses, or the meaning of a patient's behaviour. It cannot determine whether a patient is becoming more withdrawn, more frightened, more suicidal, more suspicious, or more in need of a human connection. Now, the reference there to the technology carrying significant clinical, ethical, and human rights implications, have we touched on those points during the course of your evidence?
I believe so.
Is there anything more that you'd like to say about that?
No.
Could that then bring us on to section 31 of the report and your recommendations? And we can see these set out from page 100. Before we go to them, these proceed on the assumption that Oxyvision remains in an inpatient unit, don't they?
It does, yes.
So before we get to that, do we need to bear in mind all the points you've made, including the ones you've just made, about your views on Oxyvision and all the points that you've just raised? Do we need to take those into account on the question of whether Oxyvision should be there in the first place?
Yeah, and I still remain on the fence whether I think Oxyvision should remain in inpatients. I can see the benefit of assisted technology, but not for all patients. Like any intervention, it's not one thing fits all. So I'm still on the fence that it's an all model, but I can certainly see it might benefit some.
Thank you. So just moving on to dealing with your recommendations in turn, the first recommendation is use of Oxyvision should be clinically justified, appropriate and consent-based. Would you explain what you mean by that, please?
I think if there's a clinical rationale for it needing to be used and the patient consents to it, then it can be used, but it should be used with time limited, like observations, because a patient's risk, clinical need should change, and it should change in line with that patient's travelling through their recovery. So it should not be on from the point of admission to the point of discharge. It might be just necessary for a period of 48 hours when somebody is in the most distress. And we balance observation levels with the use of assisted technology.
Thank you. The second recommendation is that staff access should be individually logged and auditable. Could you just cover that, please?
Yes, I believe it has moved to that staff login does require to access a room. So that is absolutely, when you're accessing patients' clinical record, there's a data log of that, and I think the same should apply for accessing a patient's bedroom, and it should be communicated that it is only when absolutely necessary would you view a bedroom, and when it is viewed, it's followed up by a discussion. Was it necessary? Was it informative? And also let the patient know that they've just had the room viewed and what that tells us.
Thank you. The third recommendation, there should be clear national standards on the minimum response to VBT and VBPMS alerts. Would you just address that? Having
talking to colleagues and different professionals in the field, there seemed to be a difference of what is good practice in response to alert times. So some people assume the quicker the response time, that was good practice, where the delay. So I think I touched on it in the report. So a reset of 3 seconds would say, oh yes, you've been alerted to that incident immediately, but it doesn't actually evidence whether you've checked on the patient. It could just be that you've reset the button. Or if a check that went beyond the 15 seconds, that could imply that somebody actually has physically gone round and reviewed the patient. So depending on who you talk to, a better understanding of what is the expected standard of alert set, and actually do they mean anything?
Thank you. Your fourth recommendations, audit should include patient and family experience. Would you expand on that?
Yes, so when we order in observations and engagement and the use of Oxyvision, it should be capturing the families and patient views. How was it for them? Did they feel as though they were, their observations were compliant? Did the staff member come? Patients do tell me, I'm on level 2 obs and nobody's been to check on me. So that would be another source of, are those engagements happening not just from a professional's point of view, but gathering from families and carers?
Now, we may have covered most of the final recommendation. Observation engagement and VB-PMS training should be face-to-face and competency-based. We can read what you've set out there. Is there anything more that you'd like to say about that now?
No, I've got nothing more to add. I think I just stated that because there's a lot of emphasis on the nurse in charge, ensuring that somebody's competent, and they're juggling competing demands, and it's really, really busy, challenging environment, and I do believe that the competency of those staff should lie with higher management.
Thank you. So do you have any questions for Ms Archibald at this stage?
No.
So we're going to take a pause in a moment for 15 minutes. When we come back, there will be some questions from other lawyers representing some of the inquiry's core participants. Chair, we'll hear from a maximum of 4 lawyers, as I understand it. They've provided the inquiry with notice of the areas they wish to cover, and the inquiry's responded about those areas which they are permitted to cover. We require a short period of time just to arrange things. The lawyers will have a maximum of 15 minutes from the moment they sit down at the table. And Chair, your instructions are that that must be enforced. There is one lawyer who's dealing with the shorter matters who will have 5 minutes in which to raise those matters. And if necessary, there may be some more questions from me as well. I will call advocates forward and they'll come to the table here. But as I've said, we'll have a pause before that happens. Could we be back and starting again, please, at 5 to 4?
5 to 4.
Mr Griffin.
Chair, we're now at the stage where we will be hearing questions from recognised legal representatives of court participants. I'm going to ask in each case that when an advocate comes forward, before they ask their questions, would they kindly introduce themselves first?
Good afternoon, Miss Archibald. My name's Fiona Scolding, King's Counsel. I'm asking questions on behalf of Leo Limited, who for today's purposes I shall refer to as Oxa Health. I've been permitted to ask a few questions arising from your report. The first question I wanted to ask you is about the CQC and NHS England guidelines. I think I can see extensive reference to them in your report. In your professional opinion, do they set out an adequate set of standards and balances for trusts to consider and reflect upon before deciding whether or not to use vision-based monitoring systems?
I do, yes.
Right. And do you consider that that guidance is sufficient for trusts in order to start them down the road of determining whether it would be appropriate to introduce or not introduce the technology?
I do, yes.
Thank you very much. In respect of using technology to support observations, and just to indicate the position of Oxy Health is not that it is a substitute for observations, but it should only be used to support physical observations by staff. Do you agree that in respect of pulse and respiration, the sort of vital signs observations, they are necessary for the vast majority of patients who are in inpatient care, in particular because of the drugs that most of them will be taking?
Sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Yes.
Sorry.
The vast majority of patients in inpatient care will be taking some form of drug, or very often will be taking some form of drug to try and help them with their mental health condition. As a result of that, those drugs may well have a sedative effect or other physical side effects. Is it therefore necessary to take somebody's pulse and respiration rate in order to ensure that they are physically well whilst taking those sorts of drugs?
They are two elements that are essential alongside other physical health observations, yes.
Thank you. Do you consider that pulse and respiration taken remotely can be of assistance in maintaining or keeping some record of physical health or physical deterioration over time?
I haven't seen evidence that the record of the vital signs taken remotely have actually been used directly into the other set of physical observations that you might want to take.
But it could be. You just haven't seen evidence that it has been.
In my understanding, you would need to take it over a longer period of time rather than the 15 seconds to get an accurate reading. It could alert you to it could encourage you to go and do a full set of physical observations.
Okay. And also, do you agree or accept that the technology can be useful at night to take remote observations as alongside a physical check, if necessary for risk assessment purposes?
It could be helpful during the night time.
Right. Okay. You say in your report at paragraph 1217 that staffing levels and available clinical time have not increased in line with the need for additional governance and accountability over observations. Are you therefore saying that if this sort of technology is to be implemented, there does need to be additional time, as you suggested towards the end of your evidence, that there would need to be a person who was responsible for looking at the visual-based monitoring systems?
I think there needs to be a robust, so within a shift plan in the day, who is checking that alert system, and that it's not just solely reliant on somebody in a room that might not be in the room.
No.
So there needs to be some structure
Somebody
around.
on
so
the ward
yes,
who's
so that
actively
will be
looking.
an additional task assigned to a member of staff. Some places will assign the person who's doing level 1 observations to the portable device, for example.
Right. Do you consider that Health, Oxyvision can be particularly useful in places such as seclusion, in long-term segregation, or in health-based places of safety?
I can see their use in those areas, yes,
can
if
you
it's not safe to enter.
Yeah, and can you explain why they would be of particular use in those areas?
It can offer some assurances that a patient is breathing. If you are not able to get a full view of their, if those areas, although they are designed for full view, there are areas that might not give a full view for the practitioner reviewing them.
And in respect of seclusion, particularly patients who may be in seclusion or long-term segregation, there may well be health or particular safety risks to staff, less so with health-based places of safety, I would envisage.
Yeah, particularly patients in seclusion, the risk profile tends to be risk to others.
Yes. Okay. You set out some very useful guidance within your reports, within your report at paragraph 23.2 to 23.3 about who should be consulted in respect of consent to Health. Do you agree that those individuals should be consulted about all other aspects of a patient's care? You talk about family members, loved ones, other groups, and that it shouldn't just be for vision-based monitoring systems, but there should be kind of a good process of engaging with family members and wider kinship groups.
Yes.
On all aspects of an
all
inpatient.
All aspects of care. It should be, wherever possible, you should be getting the views and the consent of everybody involved.
And so this is a more widespread issue throughout mental health generally in terms of levels of consent or ways in which family members are engaged. It's not just an issue with vision-based monitoring, it's an issue with the system as a whole. Is that right?
Yes, I would agree that it could be improved on.
Okay. At sort of section 31 of your report, you summarise various conclusions which says in which you say that technology can have a legitimate role in supporting patient safety, but it should only ever be a supplementary tool to assist staff about movement, room presence, deterioration, nighttime activity and potential risk. And it cannot replace human interaction nor understand the meaning of and signs of different emotional responses. Is that your concluded view as to the usefulness of the vision-based monitoring system, therefore, that it's an addition to, not a replacement for?
Yes, I see it as an addition. I think from having gone through this, writing this report, preparing the report, I think when it was implemented, it's gone as a blanket for everybody, and I think that's where the error, it can be used, but it has to be meaningful and specific to individuals.
And can you also identify that you looked at a number of case summaries, some of which involved the use of Oxyvision. Can you identify with any of those in any way in which, whether there was any way in which it was the technology that was problematic, or it was the use of the or was it rather the use of that technology or the misuse of that technology that was problematic?
I think it was the use and the misuse of the technology.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Chair, we'll be hearing next from Ms Campbell. May I ask that she comes forward?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Ms Archibald. My name is Brenda Campbell, and the questions that I ask are on behalf of the families of Christopher Nota, of Edwige Nzilu and Sophie Alderman. In fact, the latter two, you have considered their case summaries and their families' evidence. And I also represent Stop Oxyvision, whose work you have considered in the preparation of your report. Many of my questions are premised on your first recommendation, and we looked at it just a little while ago. It's at page 100 of your report. And I don't need it on screen unless it would be helpful to you, but it says that the use of Oxyvision should be clinically justified, appropriate and consent-based. Oxyvision should only be used where there is a clearly documented individualised clinical rationale and where its use is proportionate to the identified risks. And I might just focus in initially on the issue of consent-based, if I may. As to obtaining that informed consent, have you in your research or preparation seen any data or research demonstrating what proportion of patients would actually consent to being monitored by Oxyvision if they were fully informed as to how the technology works?
The only information that I have reviewed that was the audit on the consent base, which didn't highlight that it was routinely been, so the standard was that consent would be sought at the beginning of an admission within a time frame. The audit data that I've seen didn't show compliance with that.
With that protocol or
yes.
with that process. The inquiry heard evidence, in fact, yesterday, that where an informed opt-in consent model was adopted by Leicestershire Partnership Trust, fewer than half of the patients were willing to consent to the use of Oxyvision in their bedrooms. And some of those who did consent later withdrew that consent when they became aware that the system included cameras that were recording. Does that surprise you?
No, that doesn't surprise me.
We also, well, perhaps I can ask you, why not?
I think when patients realise that it can record them over 24 hours, that might raise concerns for them. So initially they would say, I don't want it on. As they progress through their care, they might reconsider that, but it does not surprise me. I think when they're fully informed that they might be a bit sceptical of what it can offer, so they would rather not go with it rather than go with it.
We looked at yesterday also a further Leicestershire Partnership Trust report which contained an account of an incident in which a pregnant patient, I think in fact you've discussed this briefly this afternoon, a pregnant patient had initially consented to Oxyvision but subsequently withdrew that consent, sleeping in an interview room rather than in the bedroom with the Oxyvision system installed. And this afternoon you've told us that one significant consequence of having Oxyvision installed on a blanket basis in wards is that it can cause that element of distress to patients who refuse consent to having it in their room. And you have experience of that, isn't that right?
That's right, yes.
Now, another consequence of that, however, is also related difficulties for staff trying to resolve that distress or make practical changes to keep that patient safe in an alternative environment. How significant is that consequence, the other side of that?
It can be quite significantly consequence in that when it can lead to patients not trusting us, but equally some patients report that they feel that we don't trust them either. So it's and that's why we're using this remote monitoring to monitor their behaviour. So it works on both parts.
Does it conversely also materialise that having Oxyvision enabled in some rooms but not others is liable to cause inefficiencies for staff running perhaps two parallel approaches in relation to different patients in different bedrooms?
It might make, if not all patients have Oxyvision switched on, the patients who do have it on, it might actually make the staff who are monitoring that system more alert because of the active, where when it was a blanket ban, it became possibly less meaningful to the staff who were monitoring the system. So if it's switched on for patients who are agreeing and there's a specific purpose to it and a known risk, it might make the professional more alerted to the alert as such.
Well, that may be an optimistic or a hopeful outcome, but does it also give rise to a risk, again, on the flip side of that coin, of perhaps failures in handover or failures in communication or record keeping resulting in misunderstandings because checks have been missed on Oxyvision where it's believed they have been done?
Yes, I suppose it does, and there's also a risk that if patients' bedrooms move, that the device doesn't get switched off in line with the patient moving, so there would have to be robust systems in place to make sure that Oxyvision is meaningful to that patient, that is switched on, because patients do move bedrooms quite frequently on an inpatient ward, so it's just being mindful of that.
Now, you've been asked a number of questions about clinical justifications or benefits, and you've observed in relation to nighttime checks. I think your evidence this afternoon was possibly there could be benefits through the night so that you're not interrupting sleep, by way of example. I want to ask you a few questions about that. An August 2020 Early Insights report, which we understand was prepared jointly by ePut and OxyHealth, repeatedly characterises remote observations as less restrictive than in-person observations, particularly at night. Do you accept that a measure that might be thought less physically intrusive can simultaneously constitute a much greater infringement on a patient's privacy?
Yes, I do.
And you've observed, in fact, in answer to a question from Mr. Griffin this afternoon, that for some patients, nighttime is a particularly difficult time when they might need an additional degree of support for the reasons that you've outlined. Does it follow that withdrawing regular nighttime physical checks that provide a level of in-person reassurance and replacing them with remote observation or surveillance, far from being clinically justified to promote sleep, might in fact be clinically detrimental for some patients?
It could be. That's why it would have to be individually tailored, whether it would be appropriate for each patient to do remote checks.
And it comes back to your evidence about very much a patient-centred case-by-case basis. You mentioned in your evidence this morning about nighttime ward environment and about other noises, and you talked about heavy doors or other patients or alarms going off. To what extent has this source of sleep disturbance on wards been measured? So in other words, are observations more likely to keep a patient awake at night than other environmental noise such as staff talking or heavy doors or alarms going off?
To my knowledge, I don't know. I know there's been research done on sleep on mental health inpatient wards, and I think there's a number of factors that keep patients awake, and it's not just observations, but it is other noise factors and environmental factors as well.
Yes, because wards can be busy and noisy places even during the night.
They can, and the mattresses aren't particularly comfortable. The bedding is not particularly comfortable. So there's lighting isn't particularly comfortable. So there's lots of factors that can affect a patient's sleep.
I want to move on to ask you about another recollection given by ePut staff in the Early Insights report, and it's under the heading Improving Privacy for Vulnerable Persons. And a member of staff is quoted as saying, many of our patients have histories of sexual abuse. When we have male staff on observations, they need to enter the ladies' bedrooms at night to check on them. For these ladies, it can be very triggering, waking up confused and seeing a man in their bedroom. For a moment, they forget where they are, and it's very disturbing for them. But now that we use OxyHealth to monitor them overnight discreetly and remotely, which we really like and which we know benefits the patients. I mean, thinking about that as an example, do you agree that a female patient being monitored remotely and observed in her bedroom at night by a male member of staff is hardly better than a staff member going into her bedroom to check on her?
I would see it more distressing to be observed remotely because you're not aware of when and how frequent it's happening, where in the room you're aware.
Well, that in fact deals with, to some extent, my next question. At least with a physical check, a female patient would be aware.
And you can
that
raise
there's someone
and
in the room.
it empowers the patient to raise an objection.
I want to ask a few questions about the potential benefit of collecting of vital signs using the technology during the night. We heard yesterday from Mr. Patino from LPT about their experience of piloting Oxyvision on their wards. Are you aware that one of the reasons LPT ultimately terminated a contract with Oxyvision following the conclusion of their pilots last year was that the staff reported that the system frequently failed to collect vital signs during the night, rendering in-person nighttime checks necessary in any event?
I wasn't aware of that.
Well, does it surprise you?
No, when I've looked at the vital signs attempts, but the actual readings, the reading is below 50%, but I wasn't able to interpret why it was less than 50%. I made the assumption that the patient just wasn't sitting still, or the areas were covered. I didn't know what the rationale was for that.
And in fact, in your evidence today, you've told us of an additional degree of danger that comes from perhaps assumptions like that being made by staff, that the system is failing to collect vital signs. And the danger could be that the failure to collect vital signs is in itself being misinterpreted, and there's a much more significant risk in the room to that patient at that time.
I don't know enough about it to say why it couldn't get vital sign readings, so I don't feel as though I'm able to fully comment.
But do those failures to get readings and the data that you have considered raise further questions about the purported clinical justification of collecting vital signs during nighttime observations?
There's also an assumption that people are pressing for vital signs, but the patient might not be in the room, so it might be inappropriate use from staff attempting to get vital signs.
Okay.
Just
and my
indicate there's
final question.
2 minutes. Oh, perfect.
Thank you.
Sorry to have interrupted.
Thank you. Now, my final question is this. In circumstances where we understand that OxyHealth charges a flat licensing fee per ward, regardless of whether the system is switched on or even installed in rooms, and of course that is ultimately paid from the public purse, would you agree that consideration, perhaps serious consideration, should be given to whether the financial outlay for the system is justified?
Yes, I think individual trusts would need to answer if it's financially justified in their service and if they're seeing the benefit from it.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Chair, we'll next hear questions from Ms. Bartlam. I ask that she comes forward.
Good afternoon, Miss Archibald. My name's Ciara Bartlam and I ask questions on behalf of the charity Inquest. I just have 2 short questions on Oxyvision. The first relates to the appropriate use of it, and a couple of weeks ago now, the inquiry heard evidence from a person called Ian Arthur. Now, he was the matron on the Peterborough unit when Oxyvision was piloted in 2020 and helped to produce the first standard operating procedure. Mr. Arthur explained that Oxyvision could be used as an observation tool that could help staff to provide a less intrusive intervention to somebody who might otherwise need to be observed constantly. And the question is this: should Oxyvision be used for this purpose, in your view?
No.
And can I ask why?
It does not take away the human factors that a professional or mental health nurse needs to be able to engage the patient to make an informed decision about their care and treatment, and vice versa. So it should not replace.
And my second question is on that informed decision and a patient's informed consent. You've explained to the inquiry that in your view, patients should be told that Oxyvision is recording 24/7. In your view, should patients also be told about the risk of staff misuse and any limits on the available measures to prevent that from happening?
I think patients should be informed of what staff have access to and what they do with that information, and patients should be informed of how frequent that the camera is accessed.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Chair.
And the last advocate we will hear questions from today is Ms. Misra. May I ask that she comes forward?
Good afternoon, Ms Archibald. My name is Alina Mishra and I'm leading counsel instructed by Hodge, Jones and Allen, which represents a number of bereaved families and lived experience clients. So thank you very much for confirming earlier today that in preparing your report, you reviewed the documents provided by the inquiry, which included family statements, some of which related to our clients, and case summaries. I'm going to ask you some questions by way of clarification of your report, if I may, but I have very clearly in mind what your terms of reference were. I hope with the benefit of having read the material provided by the inquiry, you may be able to assist a little further, and no doubt you'll be pleased to know that I think I am the last to be questioning you at the end of what is a long day, no doubt. So if I could start first of all with page 12, paragraph 4.1 of your report, where you say that prior to 2000, there was little guidance for observations practices in mental health settings. And you go on very helpfully through to about paragraph 4.10 to cite a chronology of policies and procedures as they then developed. Ms Archibald, I wondered if I could ask you, in your opinion, how effective were any of these in providing sufficient guidance on observations?
I think they were effective. I witnessed changes on the ground of how we thought about observations and engagement, and the governance became more robust. It definitely influenced. We became more trauma informed in our way we practice. So I do think it significantly influenced practice.
And going back to your evidence this afternoon, is that because of the emphasis on the therapeutic engagement side of it?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. So remaining at page 12 of your report, I'm now at paragraph 3.3, where you say that when supportive observations are delivered effectively, they can improve safety of care. Now, based on your review of the evidence which has been made available to you by the inquiry, and where necessary, contrasting with your professional experience in Cumbria, are you able to say whether this was happening across the Essex Trusts in the index period, 2000 to 2023?
I've only been given evidence of where things haven't gone to plan or where sadly people have died. I am sure that there was patients who received care in Essex Trust who observations did help them. So the information I had was based on people who had died, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I don't know if that's answered you.
So from your perspective, it's a snapshot. And
it's a snapshot. I'm assuming that they had lots of patients in their care who observations did benefit.
Thank you. So I'm now going to move on to page 16 of your report, and it's paragraphs 5.1 to 5.24, in which you deal with the defined levels of observations and engagement. And in particular, paragraph 5.1, you refer to the NICE guidelines and the ETOC guidance. And you say, the guidance emphasises that observation is a therapeutic intervention and should not be undertaken as a passive or purely observational task. So again, based on your review of the case summaries and other underlying materials and documents you were provided with, do you consider that that guidance was followed in the cases concerned, and if so, to what extent? Just as a general impression.
No, it does not appear that the guidance was followed in a majority of the cases. Sometimes the observation, I couldn't see evidence of the engagement, but in some cases the observations didn't occur.
Thank you very much. Are you able to say, from what you've seen, which factors played or may have played a role in not following the guidance?
Seems staffing, training, experience all played a factor. Culture.
Thank you very much. So moving on now to page 22 of your report, and I'm going to paragraph 6, if I may. You say there that physical health monitoring is an essential part of holistic assessment for all patients admitted to mental health wards. In the evidence which you've reviewed in preparing your report, did you see any evidence of holistic assessments being carried out?
Yes, I've seen there was cases where physical health monitoring had taken place, and there was some elements of holistic care, but not completely. And as I say, I've seen cases where the outcome was deaths. I've not seen the other side of the care that was given.
Thank you very much indeed. So turning now to page 33, paragraph 11.3 of your report. You state there that capacity and consent should always be considered when determining and implementing observation levels. And you go on in that same paragraph to explain that valid consent should be informed and voluntary, with patients receiving a clear explanation regarding the purpose and nature of the observations. Again, in your review of the illustrative cases in Essex with which you were provided, was there any evidence that this was considered and implemented?
There was cases where there was informal voluntary patients on enhanced observation levels, and I took it that the patients had consented to those observation levels. The evidence didn't suggest that they were objecting to them. I did see cases where patients were admitted informally and then later on in the treatment became detained and observation levels were increased. So I've seen, but the case summaries didn't specifically refer to whether the patient consented or not to the observation levels.
Thank you very much. For my next question, I'm going to refer to a couple of paragraphs that you've included in your report, and if it's helpful, I can summarise them, but I'll put them to you and then go to the question, and please do let me know if it would be helpful for me to either take you to them or summarise. So in particular, it's paragraphs 8.1, 12.7 and 12.15 of your report. And my question is really this. Is the efficacy of observations in terms of a safety net for patients who are under the care of the Trust inextricably connected with the accuracy, timeliness and appropriateness of care plans and risk assessments? Do they two go hand in glove?
They should do, yes.
And can I ask you, in your own practice, how often do you feel that observations have been adversely affected by the lack of appropriate care plans or risk assessments or the documentation of them?
Yes, there's serious consequences if there's a lack of care planning or adherence to the care plan.
Did you find any evidence of this in the materials you reviewed for the report, to the extent you can recall specific cases?
I didn't see any evidence to suggest that the care plans were collaborative. There might have been care plans, I just didn't see them. But in the case of, I think it was Elise, the care plan wasn't followed when she went back to her room. So I've seen non-compliance with the care plan, but I haven't seen the details of the individuals and their care plan.
Thank you. And was that the case of Elise Sebastian you were referring to there?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to a different area, and perhaps one of the knotty issues. I know you said earlier that it's sometimes quite difficult to achieve the right balance, but how is the tension between using the least intrusive method possible and dealing with increased risk of harm or death resolved, in your opinion? And is it really a proportionality question?
I don't know, that's a big question.
It is a big question, and I think you earlier expressed it was difficult. If I can put it this way, in your professional expertise and opinion, what is the best way to balance those factors, if it is simply balancing of factors, to arrive at the right course of action, as it were?
You want to be the least restrictive in all cases, and it might be when you do a restrictive practice. That's where it's time limited. It is a balance of that interpersonal relationship with the person that you're caring for. It could be the treatment plan that the patient, the effectiveness of the treatment plan, and alongside that it could be the observation levels to meet that patient's needs, and it has to be done at the right time by the right people with the right skills to do that. A combination of all those, a good understanding of the patient, formulation, know who the patient is, what they're about, who they are, collaborating with families, developing a treatment plan and adapting observation levels in accordance with need. Somebody might be having a difficult day followed by a good day, and that's when it should fluctuate. But you should be prepared for things not going to plan as well at all times. There's a reason why people are in hospital, so you have to be prepared for deterioration, rapid deterioration in some cases.
Does this go back to your point to the inquiry earlier that really this is best achieved by a case-by-case basis?
It is, yeah.
Thank you. And finally, page 99 of your report, from about paragraph 31.1 onwards, in the reflections and conclusions section, you say, and this chimes with what you said in your evidence a little bit earlier, technology can have a legitimate role in supporting patient safety, but you have, of course, in your report identified concerns, and you've also identified in the course of your extensive evidence today concerns that you hold as well. Can you say whether in any of the illustrative case summaries with which you were provided by the inquiry, the use of Oxyvision technology led to improved care for any of the patients?
I can't, I don't believe I can see the direct link from improving their care.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Ms. Archibald. Those are my questions, and I believe that I'm within my time as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chair, I have no further questions for Ms. Archibald. Do you have any further questions at this stage?
I don't.
Ms. Archibald, that's the end of all of our questions for you. May I personally thank you both for your report and for your evidence today.
I'd like to reiterate those thanks. We've worked you very hard, but it has been extremely helpful, both your report and your evidence today, so thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow?
Thank you very much. Tomorrow we resume at 10 a.m, where we'll be hearing from a further expert witness, in fact 2 witnesses giving evidence simultaneously. So 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you, Chair.